Hello, fellow key searchers. Thank you for joining me on part 3 of my crazy hypothesis that the jewels are telling us, are holding a secret of their own by telling us a story about the clue that can be seen from where they are buried. I'm picking up where I left off with 3 puzzles remaining. The first that I'm looking at is Roanoke. So Roanoke, I believe the gem is telling us that it's a garnet that is securely fastened like a magnet to a belt buckle rhinestone. Like a belt buckle rhinestone. So if you look at the image, the statue, indeed the garnet looks like it's glued on to the metal belt part, or like a magnet. So then we look at the key words here that it is fastened to the belt buckle. Obviously that is a mechanical term that we all associate with airplanes, but looking at the garnet itself, it is magnetic in fact, based on the elements that it is composed of. So most people assume this has to do with the Wright brothers, as it is near Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills, which are close to Roanoke. But from the first time I saw this image, the way the scarecrow statue's arms are propped up, held up, always reminded me of like an old Cessna airplane where the wings are propped up very similarly. And in fact, even looking at the statue's helmet, face guard, whatever you call it, looks like the front of an airplane as well. So I thought, well, let's take it further then. What other clues might be alluding to the Wright brothers? Again, as with all of the previous puzzles, the images always show motion, action, and the clouds always looked strange to me. They look blurry, as if we're moving through them, as in we're flying through them. So then I thought, well, perhaps that moon isn't a moon. Maybe it's a headlight. Maybe it's a beacon light. So I started looking more into the Wright Brothers Memorial Center, and they're in fact the welcome center that looks very much like the helmet of the statue. And then I thought, well, let's look at the monument itself, and it is described as having gigantic wings that represent a bird about to take flight. And on the door at the entrance, there are some stainless steel doors that depict images of telling stories, and one of them is the story of Icarus, the Greek mythical character that glued on some wings, or as they describe it, fastened a pair of wings onto his shoulders, flew too close to the sun, they melted, he fell and crashed back to earth. So then I started thinking, okay, well, there's got to be more to this monument. So I thought perhaps that's the feathers in the statue that, as you can see, they're at a very sharp angle, very precise, and very clear to see that there are separate feathers comprising the monument's wings. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe there's even more. So I turned the image on its side, and I always thought the dark, shadowed, long feather in the top right corner always looked odd to me. So I thought, well, maybe it's meant to represent the Wright brothers airstrip at the center, the Memorial Center. But again, this is just food for thought. Let's look at now the bonus round here. While I was working on this video, it took me so long to finish this video because of the bonus that people have been talking about, the nudge. So I thought I would test it out. So here we go. And looking at the image, what's happening now, people are describing the left and right hand. I believe it's a catch and release, which is a fishing term. And if that's true, then others have suggested it's an underwater scene. So I thought, let's check this out. Let's see if it's true. And then I started looking again at the string under the arms of the statue, and they looked like little keyholes to me with string. So I thought, well, that looks like might be a fishing rod. And all the little things dangling, I thought, oh, I'm not a fishing person, but and from what I've seen and all that I know, I would assume if that is a fishing pole, then the bells and the keys are fishing tackle, fishing hooks. So then I started looking closer again. What else would then be telling us it's an underwater scene? I looked at the little water sprite. I believe that's what this is. And it looks initially like he's falling down or dangling, but actually I think he's floating up and he's pushing the bubble up. And that also then reminded me of a scuba diver. Then I thought, okay, what about a scuba diver? Well, If you look at this water sprite, its back is completely bent. Then I remembered, oh, again, I've never scuba dived, but I've heard enough that they call it the bends when you ascend it too fast. So then I got to thinking, okay, well, what is famous? What else can tell us more about it being underwater? I looked again now to the next clue that people have been discussing, which I believe now is a spoon lure. It looks like a spoon carrying some kind of marble, nickel, yeah, like a marble, metallic perhaps, and something else kind of counterweighing it down. Well, that's a spoon lure. I think the whole image represents a spoon lure, which is also a fishing term, a fishing hook. And that's when I realized, okay, well then what around Roanoke is famous for being underwater? And that leads us to the Virginia Dare statue at the Elizabethan Gardens. And people have always suspected this statue for many years, so this is nothing new. However, when we look closely at the story of this statue, we learn that it had once been shipwrecked, obviously underwater, in the ocean for 2 years, and it was fished out. And I believe that's what the spoon represents, with the marble in it, that the marble is scooping, the spoon is scooping the marble out of the water. And taking it further, the statue itself of Virginia Dare, she is cloaked in a fishnet. So then when we look at the clues in the verse, it says to mica and driftwood. I believe perhaps that clue is meant to say the base of the statue does in fact look pretty unique, and perhaps it's made of mica. I couldn't find anything to prove that, but I did think about the driftwood part, and I realized, well, shipwrecks tend to cause driftwood. When they fall apart into little pieces, some of those pieces end up floating onto shore. So that led us, of course, to the location of the statue, which is, as I already mentioned, at the Elizabethan Gardens on Roanoke Island. Then I started looking at what other people have mentioned in the past. The entryway looks a lot like the window in the image. There's a plaque on the entry wall that actually talks about matching clues in the verse, the dark forest. In addition, outside of that, walking distance from there, there's a monument dedicated to the original settlers there, again mentioning Virginia Dare. So I think this is pretty strong evidence that we are to look. The jewel will be found near the Virginia Dare statue. I say this because there is much more evidence in the verse and in the image regarding Virginia Dare than there is the Wright brothers. I think the Wright brothers was just to get you to Roanoke Island. Next, I took a look at New Orleans, where the turquoise is camouflaged in the grandfather clock's suitcase handle / face. From the first time I saw this, I thought it was strange that it is the only jewel in all of the puzzles that seems to be hidden, where you can easily miss it if you're not paying close attention. So I thought, okay, well, we know camouflaging means disguising. New Orleans is famous for Mardi Gras, where people get into disguises. So I thought that would be the theme of where the jewel is. So then I looked at the Mardi Gras fountain. So then I looked at the fact that the jewel is surrounded by the moon and the stars. And I thought that is very peculiar. So that's how I came across the Mardi Gras fountain, which is surrounded by the crest of the city's carnival cruise, which would be a very similar theme. Then I started again from the first time I saw this image. The clock face looks very odd. It looks like a suitcase or a bag of some sort. Well, lo and behold, in researching the city's history, I came across the Casket girls, which were the original French women that helped to colonize New Orleans. And their suitcases were very boxy. This is all they came with. And those boxes, oddly enough, were called caskets, just like the casks that we are looking for. And they were called the original mothers of New Orleans. Eventually, with time, they wound up being I guess processed, for lack of a better word, by some Ursuline nuns. And there are various buildings and locations throughout New Orleans that were founded by these nuns. And perhaps one of these is tied to the puzzle as not necessarily the main clue, but maybe a secondary clue. The last puzzle that I have left to review is New York. This one racked my brain more than any other. I really struggled with this one because it seems to be so simple that it's meant for someone local to New York to understand. But let's look at the topaz as one of the Statue of Liberty's teardrops. That's the first thing that I noticed about this image, was the unusual nature of these teardrops, water drops, whatever you want to call them. But if we look at the fact that the image is of the Statue of Liberty as some kind of floating goddess, then it makes a clear connection. We can argue a clear connection that immigrants coming to Ellis Island would have shed tears of happiness, sadness, falling into an ocean of tears. Those are all very common figures of speech. But again, I think this is why I think this is such a strong clue for the puzzle, is because of the whole theme of The Secret, A Treasure Hunt, which is immigration to the New World and the fair folk being immigrants as well. So the next obvious clue that most people don't seem to talk about is the steam mist that the waves are creating. A lot of people have suggested they are the Scottish emblem. So I started looking at important figures of Scottish descent in New York, lo and behold, or monuments to these people, to someone of that background, and I came across this David Glasgow Farragut at this, without knowing that other people on some of the Facebook groups were also looking at this character. But because of them, I continued delving further. Lo and behold, this guy is part of the American Civil War. We already know the author, Byron Preiss, was a big American Civil War nut. He is most famous for saying, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." He so happens to be part Scottish and was a member of the Scottish Rite Masonry. As most of us know, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead" has over time morphed into "full steam ahead," which I believe is probably what the mist in the water of the waves crashing is to represent, perhaps. So then I started looking more into the history of this admiral, and his flagship was the Hartford. So I thought maybe that's what the clue in the verse is, a play on words of him of Hardward instead of Hartford. In 3 volumes, indeed, he ramrodded his way through to win a battle in the Civil War and took control of 3 forts from the Confederacy. So his tactics were seen as very, dramatic at the time, where they were like water mines floating that, to bomb ships to smithereens, and he didn't care. He just went straight to, through the ships to destroy and attack and conquer, whatever you want to call it. So perhaps the Japanese clues tell us that there is also wordplay here, that we should start with chicken. So perhaps we should interpret that as he played a game of chicken, or he was not a chicken. He was obviously recklessly courageous in his approach, but was successful nonetheless. So then I started looking at those teardrops again, and I thought the teardrops show motion. They're at an angle. So now when you put them on their side, you can see here, they're not falling straight down. So they're at an angle. So perhaps they're meant to represent some bombs that were involved in the Civil War campaign. I don't know. I was just then looking further into the monument itself, and I saw the folds in the statue, as I believe the folds in the Paul Revere statue for Boston are in the image as well. So perhaps it's the creases in the dress. Obviously the goddess women, there are 2 women in the monument that look like the one in the image for the puzzle. And then the center panel of the monument for David Farragut also looks weird to me. Is that a mountain? Is that an ocean? Is that water waves? I don't know, but it also reminds me of this, the creases in the water. Actually, from the first time I saw this image, the water to me looks like an oil slick. Like when you go to Hawaii, you go to Honolulu, the Pearl Harbor Monument, the oil is bubbling up and creates these oil slicks. Perhaps that's what this meant to represent, since he was a Navyman and it was ship battle. So I'm not sure, just food for thought. But with that, I leave you all again wondering if you have a different interpretation, any feedback would be much appreciated, so we can get one of these jewels solved. Thanks again.